Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's Watch and Learn webcast. Build an L&D action plan for COVID-19 based on insights from 50 million learners. I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Coursera. Coursera was founded with a vision of providing life-transforming learning experiences to anyone, anywhere. It is now a leading online learning platform for higher education where 56 million learners from around the world come to learn skills of the future. Over 200 of the world's top universities and industry educators partner with Coursera to offer courses, specializations, certificates, and degree programs. 2,500 companies trust their enterprise platform, Coursera for Business, to transform their talent. Should check out their other programs, Coursera for Government and Coursera for Campus, for opportunities for online education for students, alumni, faculty, and staff, and for government employees as well. My name is Alexandria Clapp. I'm the Content Manager for Learning Technologies, and I will be your moderator today. I know Adam will keep you engaged through this session, so please share your questions and comments with your fellow participants in the chat box. We will have time for Q&A at the end of our event, so don't be shy. I'm very pleased to introduce today's speaker, Adam Lewis, Head of Skills Transformation at Coursera. At Coursera, Adam helps companies define the skills they need for the future and designs curriculums to drive digital learning. Before working at Coursera, Adam was a management consultant at Morehouse, helping clients to deliver transformational change. He also designed the firm's first consulting academy, and when his time is flexible, he teaches his own course in public speaking. We are so excited to have Adam here with us today, and so without further ado, I will pass it over to him.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Fantastic.
We can.
Okay. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. So I think you've got a good overview of what I do, but just to kind of go down a little deeper. So I lead our skills transformation team in the Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And really what we're all about is helping customers to say what's coming in the future in terms of skills, and then what content and what curriculum works well for digital learning underneath. So a lot of what came out of the data that we have of our 56 million learners is really saying what's changed, what does that look like, what do skills need and mean, and I think there's a real opportunity for us to dive down into detail. So please ask your questions. I am joined by one of my colleagues, Vinod, who is our senior data scientist, and he will be answering questions on the chat. So if you see anything pop up from Vinod, that will be why. But Alexandra will hopefully answer any questions to me throughout this webinar, but also mainly at the end. So just a very quick one. As Alexandra mentioned, Coursera, we do have 200 university and industry partners who create content. We put that online, and on the consumer side, we give that on a one-to-one basis to our customers. And then we also have this enterprise business for 2,500 of our enterprise customers. And that's really where we play and really what we're going to talk about today, because it's about how enterprises can transform their talent using this content and understanding the skills of the future. So without further ado, we are talking today about COVID-19, as is everyone in the world. But I think it's really interesting because where we are with COVID-19 is that it's started to really shift what we need to think about as learning and development leaders. So on the one hand, we've got this incredible amount of anxiety and stress that's coming across the globe as people worry about their health and the health of their loved ones, and then also their jobs and kind of the economy. So that's something that first and foremost we in L&D need to be thinking about and supporting. Then we have this idea that everyone has to transition to virtual work, which is on the one hand, some people are finding very difficult. On the other hand, you've got a lot of companies who are continually ongoing trying to manage this transition. And then you've got the people who are transitioned, are kind of adapting to that world of work. So we really want to start to understand what's happening there and how people are dealing with it. And then this final piece, which is this preparation for the future, which quite a lot of people maybe don't want to talk about yet because it's still on the horizon and we don't quite know what it looks like. But the world of work may be very different in the future once this is over. So we really need to start thinking about what that looks like, even if we're not communicating it out yet. I'm going to talk about that as well. So the one thing that kind of wraps this up as we start to think about what's happening in the world is just the role of learning in all of this is pretty essential. Like never before has learning been so central to the ability to support people and also help people with all of this fast-moving change that's happening. And I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he said, you know, theoretically, like academically, this makes sense that learning has this part to play here. But what's actually happening? Like, are people actually turning to learning to support people in each of these things? And I showed him this graph, and I'd like to show you as well. This is a graph of the new users who have enrolled in Coursera courses since the COVID-19 crisis happened. So you can see that there is a 15-fold increase of people coming onto this platform to actually deliver learning. So if you're in a space out there across the globe and you're trying to convince people that learning has a fundamental place in helping people to deal with the COVID-19 crisis, like, use this graph, take this information and share it with people, because it just shows you that people are flocking to be able to get this kind of information. And what we did here at Coursera, because we are kind of obsessed with data, is we wanted to work out what was in there. We wanted to dig in and find out what's happening to this huge line and this huge trend as people start coming to learning for a bit of a rescue. And that's what we're going to do today. So today we just want to share our data and insights at the very outset of what's happening, what we're seeing in our trends, so that you can help guide your people in the future and really start understanding from the people who are here what they're seeing, how you're interpreting that data, if it actually resonates with what you have in your companies. So first, we're going to deal with what people are learning to deal with the current situation. So this anxiety, this transition to virtual world, what is happening within the learning space to manage that? Then we're going to talk about what people are learning to help them to prepare for the future. So with that one eye onto what's happening in the workplace. And then we're going to bring it together to say, what does that actually mean L&D leaders should do? So what are the things that you should be thinking about right now to support these two fundamental pillars? So as I say, we'll spend about 35 minutes to go through this and some of the content. Ask your questions as you go through. Either Vinod will answer them or I will answer them. And if we can't, then, well, it's probably not worth knowing about. It is. We'll find a question and we'll answer that. So we're going to start with what are people learning to deal with this current situation? And I think the easiest way to do this is to just look at the context just a little bit of what's happening around us, because there's some amazing reports that are flying around. And one of them is this from McKinsey, which talks about the signs of distress related to COVID-19. So if you haven't seen this, the number of people who have reported in the last week that they have been anxious, depressed, or anxious and depressed is between 63 and 74%, which is just enormous. So the level of anxiety across the globe at the moment is huge. We have people showing that they have moderate or high distress in also an alarming numbers that we're seeing from the data. And I actually took this course a couple of weeks ago on Coursera, which is around managing your mental health, by Professor Steve Jordans, who's a professor of psychology in the University of Toronto. And he said, what we don't really understand is that the psychology of the human body, when you look into it, is not really able to manage this level of chronic anxiety that we're seeing for this distance and this duration of time. So actually, while a lot of people have been very focused in this part, in the upfront piece, this is actually a really slow burner that we've got to keep looking at. And we'll dig into what people are doing to help manage this kind of anxiety. The second thing, and I'm sure quite a lot of people have seen this, is the transition to virtual work. This is from Worklytics about what's happening when people work from home. And if I were to give a summary of this, it's basically that working from home sucks. Okay, it's just really terrible. Okay, your work day is longer, you have interruptions, your productivity goes down. It's really very, very difficult to be quite as good as you want to be. So when you add this layer of anxiety to this difficulty of working from home, you start to see the kind of environment that we're talking about. So what we wanted to do is to say, okay, well, for all of those people, what are they seeking to help them with those things? This is our graph of our consumer side. So in February, but to be honest, our platform kind of looks fairly similar across the board from a month-to-month basis. And this says the share of enrollments that we see on our platform across each of these domains. There's a kind of a good spread, but a lot of the activity is sitting in business, computer science, and data science, because those are the skills of the future. So Vinod and his team, we went to work and find out what was happening in March. This is what happened in March. Okay, so if again you're wondering, because you don't necessarily have the signals, what are people looking for? There's a real uptick in health at the moment as people look for this kind of awareness and framing of what that looks like. But then you have this skyscraper of personal development that people are seeking out. So again, a huge, huge shift that we just don't generally see on our platform. So we wanted to go and dig into that. So if we start with health, what are people seeking out to help them with this crisis? Well, unsurprisingly, people are actually seeking out the experts. So one of the things that people talk about when they talk about well-being is they say the very worst place you can get your information about the COVID-19 crisis is the media and the news. So actually, a lot of the partners that we work with are the people who are producing the data for the media outlets. And they said to us, well, we can produce some courses that we can update on a daily basis to find out what's happening. And as you can see, so we have 4,000 courses on our platform. To get into the top 10 or the top 11 is incredibly difficult, but these have flown up. So there is this tendency, we've talked to quite a lot of our customers, that people think, well, people are kind of COVIDed out a little bit. They don't want to find out the information. But what we're seeing is the opposite, is that people are really wanting the information. They just want it in an objective way from the experts. So just as an example, we work with a leading technology company at the moment, and they just sent out an email to their learners. This was about the end of March, and they just said, look, here are some courses on COVID-19 that may help you. Sent it into their learning ecosystem, and this was the impact on their program. So they have a very strong utilization across the program. They had lockdown, sort of increase, and then just based on that email that they sent, their engagement went through the roof. And it's kind of this virtual cycle that once more people talk about it, more people will then come to learn as well. So if you're not at the moment dealing with this in a way to actually look at what people are learning and try to give them source data about COVID, and I think you're missing a trick to help people with their anxiety, but you're also missing a trick to help people with the engagement of your program, which gives you the opportunity to help them a little more as well. What about this piece? So once you've framed it and understood the health piece, what are people seeking out to help them with personal development? You guessed it. Fine. Okay. This course has increased 275% on our platform. This has flown into our top 20 of personal development for the first time ever. So if you're sitting at home and you're thinking, am I the only one who's drowning my sorrows in wine? I can tell you right now that as long as you put this veneer over it, that actually you're just taking a wine tasting course, it's actually fine. And this is a very good way for people to actually start coping. But this isn't what's actually changing it. What's changing it is this. We have a number of courses that really deal with the heart of the science behind well-being. And if you haven't already seen this course, this is from Dr. Laurie Santos from Yale. And you can already see how many people are enrolled. It's in the millions. From February to March, this course increased in enrollments by 5,500%. Okay? So again, when we talk about the zeitgeist of what people care about, they care about things from the expert, and they care about well-being. And this is a wonderful course for explaining what makes you happy, what can calm you down in this environment. And actually, Dr. Laurie Santos has gone on to be pretty famous with this, and she's started her own podcast with it. So again, it's the sort of thing that people are demanding and asking for to be able to help themselves to deal with this crisis. And it's not just this course. Personal development has grown about 1,500%, and it's same things: lifelong learning, mindfulness, positive psychology. It's the things that help people to deal with what's happening around them. And what we really mean by this is we're really talking about resilience. This is a course from the Macquarie MBA that talks about resilience. And the way it talks about resilience is to say there's two facets to resilience. One is your perception, your ability to positively frame the situation, which is what we're seeing from the COVID courses, and then your ability to develop the skills to deal with this situation, which is more around the well-being and the personal development. So this is what we're seeing from the initial signals of the data, but what we really wanted to do is to find out from you what you're seeing. So first quick poll, just to understand, how much does your L&D program right now focus on resilience? Is it a lot, where there's a huge amount of focus on resilience? Is it kind of somewhat where you're throwing some things in there, neutral at the minute, not a lot going on, or not at all? So we're going to give you about 15 seconds to answer this question, and then we'll carry on. Okay, it looks like we have the poll ending. We should hopefully be able to see the answers fairly soon. Here we go. Okay. So if everyone can see this, I think it's coming in your polling thing at the bottom of your screen. We have, in terms of a lot, 6%. 6% of people are actually really doubling down on resilience. We have 34% in the somewhat, and we have quite a number who are not doing a lot at all. Okay, so this is actually very interesting because we also took a similar kind of snapshot, and we thought people would probably be in the category of B. So people are doing somewhat, some things around their focus on resilience, but maybe not the amount that maybe people are demanding. And so what we did with this is we then dove in and we asked our question. We said, okay, well, if that's what we're seeing on the consumer side, what are we seeing on the enterprise side? So reminder, this is the consumer side of what we're seeing. This is enterprise. Okay. So a huge, huge difference. So again, when we see only 6% are doing a lot in the domain, this is what we're seeing in enterprise. And we were kind of flabbergasted by that because we thought, actually, surely the demand is the same. We're all the same kind of people. Why aren't we doing this? And when we dug in a little bit deeper, we thought, actually, there are a few reasons for this. So when we work with our enterprise customers, we do a lot of work with them around the skills transformation piece, to curate programs, to design learning paths. So actually, it's much more difficult to discover these personal development pieces themselves. We also have a lot of people who are looking at these business-related strategies. So you see businesses have an uptick. That's people looking at communication for virtual work, leadership in the 21st century. So you get a little bit more of people who are in the enterprise space thinking, well, I may be not able to do well-being, but I can do something that sort of sounds like well-being and will help me along. But the key thing that we found when we started talking to customers was actually personal development is just not widely encouraged. And the message we want to give here is, if you look at this demand signal that is absolutely enormous, that people are really wanting this personal development, then you have to start promoting it to people to get them to do a little more, to get them to invest in themselves, because that will give them a platform to go beyond. And we at Coursera have really doubled down with this ourselves. We actually offer this to our customers, a package for employee resilience, which is giving them some courses for free to try and get through this period, try and really support their customers. So when we look at this, I think there's really an answer for doubling down in personal development and really helping people out. And our example here is Novartis. We work very closely with Novartis as a strategic partner. And what they've done is they've really led by their CEO and their CLO, going out, marketing simple curations around resilience and well-being. And one of the things they did is they said it's not good enough for just our organization to increase in well-being. We need to extend it to their friends and family as well. So they offered Coursera to their friends and family, and the uptake that they saw was just enormous. So you have, I think, 50% increase in the number of people using Coursera from Novartis in the 2 weeks after this program versus the entire year that they had people on the program before. So huge spike of engagement and a huge piece of gratitude from all of the people coming in to say we feel looked after, we feel like this is a company that cares. And if I just give you one nugget of something that they did brilliantly, was to promote this. It came all the way from the CEO. So Novartis is a pharma company with 110,000 people, and the CEO shared a video of him with his son in his son's room, looking at Coursera courses and talking about the value of Coursera for friends and family. So again, the potential here is absolutely enormous if you can use it. So follow the demand. We're looking at an action plan, follow the demand, give people the opportunity to frame this crisis positively, and then it says give, but guide people towards personal development tools and techniques. That's the kind of first part, and very much looking forward to answer your questions about any of that. There is this other part, which is actually because everything's working at a different pace at the moment, people are learning at different paces and people need different things. So while you have a number of people who are still in this dealing with the current situation platform, you will have a number of your people in your organization who are looking to prepare for the future. So the reason this is so important is, as you've probably seen, and it's captured here in this Forbes article, COVID-19 is just fast-tracking digital transformation across the board. So you probably, on your WhatsApps or anything that you use, have seen these kind of memes coming around to say that what has fast-tracked digital transformation in your company is actually COVID-19 that's turning everything digital. And if you think about what people are learning in enterprise, okay, people are not learning personal development at the moment, and we encourage them to do so, but there is this 250% increase in enrollments in the enterprise space, and that is heavily in the future skills of tomorrow. So what we want to do is break that down and say, if you have an eye on the future and you're in an organization that has the capacity to think or plan for the future, what does that look like? What are people actually learning? But before we do that, we're going to go back to the poll again. This one's a little bit larger. We want to know what you're focused on in terms of your digital transformation. So most people are looking at kind of business essentials, data, technology areas, or leadership and management. If you could just pick your top three, what would you pick here for your digital transformation focus? And we'll give you about, I think, 20 seconds to answer this one.
There's a couple of questions coming in, Adam, but I think I'm just going to hold on to them because I don't want someone to miss it. So
Sure,
I'll
no problem.
think about this poll.
Okay, we have some results, hopefully coming soon to a webinar near you. Okay, oh, that is quite comprehensive. Okay, so this is really interesting. This is not necessarily what we were expecting. We have business essentials, so that's 54% have gone for business essentials. Data analysis is very high, so that's on the, or data analytics, the very early stage of data, and then a lot on leadership and human skills. So I think just speaking frankly very quickly, we find leadership and human skills are absolutely across the board what most of our organizations are looking into. I think business essentials are usually what a lot of training programs focus on, but it's actually very interesting because we're going to start talking about this data and technology piece as well, about what that means for organizations. So let's see if after the end of this webinar, we might get a few people who are interested in bumping up those numbers in the middle sections. So this is actually, it's an analysis we did going back to the very beginning of this year in 2020, which said, what are people investing in learning within business, technology, and data? Okay, so most people here are saying they're sitting in this business world and a little bit in data analytics, but what are people learning? And what you can see in this graph is on the x-axis, these are the high-level competencies that we track as an organization, and then our skills graph of 40,000 skills kind of runs underneath that. And the percentages that you see are within each domain. So within business, management is 35% of the enrollments within business. And the different colors of the bars tell you year on year what's happening. The interesting thing about this is we kind of expected there to be a bit of a shift when COVID-19 came along. So 250% of people came in. Would that actually change what they're learning? And the answer is it didn't change that much about what they were learning. What it meant is they were doubling down in these skills of the future. And what we can do is we can start just pulling that apart. So hopefully you can see this if you look in detail. In our data science space, what we would refer to as data analytics, which is our 28% in the poll, is actually what we see with a lot of companies. So a lot of companies are investing in mathematics and statistics, which is the basic data analytics that we see. But you can see year on year this is going down, versus it's being replaced by this upward trend in advanced data science and data engineering. Actually, if you're in a technology company, this data management bar is much, much higher because technology companies realize that they need to invest in data so that they can actually make decisions afterwards. Why this is important is I think if you look at data science and artificial intelligence, which had about 8 and 11%, if you look at what's happening in COVID-19 right now, in terms of the response, everything that's happening is being built on big data. Okay, so the academics who are tracking viruses, they're tracking them on real-time dashboards using global data sets that are visualized in a way that people can analyze very quickly. You've got in the health space, patient triage equipment is all being run on hugely complex algorithms that understand what the supply and demand is. In the same way as government, like, you know, we saw these stats of maybe half of the world's working population are going to be affected by this virus. Governments have to be able to understand what the support packages are and very, very quickly put them in place. So in every industry, you know, retail supply chain, telecom bandwidth, financial services, the volatility, it's no longer that these leaders are having to rely on an Excel data sheet that someone's updating every 2 weeks. It's very much statistical programming, big data, machine learning, and algorithms that are helping them to make decisions on the fly. So I think what a lot of people realize is this is where the world is heading. And if we are not investing in these skills, then we're going to be struggling because actually we're going to fall behind very, very quickly as digital transformation increases. And the one thing I'd add to this is when we talk about what we should do in learning and development and how we should engage with our learners, if you want people to learn, we need to show them the value of learning. And it's something that we find is sometimes missing in a lot of programs that we work with, is actually if you can say to someone, oh, you should learn Python for statistical programming, instead you say, actually, look at what you can do with Python if you use Python to build this kind of data set. Would you like to learn it? Oh, here's the way to learn it. And one of our customers that we work with heavily on this is Exelon Utilities, a very large utilities company. And they did just this. So they used our Data Science Academy framework to create their own analytics academy, which said, let's give data literacy to everyone in the organization, so everyone knows what data is and what you could do with it. Let's upskill our teams in data, and then let's reskill people into these critical data roles like data scientists and machine learning engineers. But what they did, which was really interesting, is they said to those learners, we want you to tell us what impact you're going to have by learning these sorts of data sets. So the learners would turn and say, okay, well, we want to impact this metric. We want to improve energy efficiency across our system. We want to reduce electrical outages. We want to increase our financial forecasting performance. So they define the value of learning, and all of a sudden learners would flow through this chart much more quickly and engagement was much higher. So if you're looking at the moment and you're not really investing in this shift into the data world, which is so important, then we would really say that it's something you should think about and think about how you can articulate that value, because that will drive the learners forward. Similarly, if we look at the technology space, again, software engineering is top of the charts here, but decreasing. What's increasing is cloud. And again, look at your COVID examples here. Which companies are doing well in this kind of crisis? It's all the cloud companies, okay? Cloud gives you this flexibility to adapt and scale. So Zoom has gone from, 10 million users in a day to 200 million users, which a couple of years ago, you wouldn't have been able to do that unless you had this cloud infrastructure to be able to scale. So we're seeing a number of our customers that are really doubling down on cloud and saying, we need to get more people to do this, because actually to hire the people to do this is much more difficult. And if you haven't seen, there's a really good report from IDC which talks to this, which says, this is a wake-up call for companies that cloud is the essence of what they should be gunning towards. And actually, we're going to see a huge amount of investment next year in sort of cloud technology. And quite a lot of our customers, when we talk to them about this, some of them say, well, we're not quite ready. We don't have the kind of frameworks to be able to do this. Actually, it doesn't have to be that difficult. So HSBC is a great example, international bank, and they had this objective to be a world's first cloud-first bank. And what they did is they took the learning content from Google Cloud, Amazon Web Services, Azure. So the content is out there. On the Coursera platform, we put it into an easy learning track for them. They were able to track their proficiency and certifications. And in very simple curations, because it was driven from the top, that the CEO said, this is what we need to all invest in. They got learning very quickly, and they've now got thousands who are going through these cloud academies to be able to turn this bank into something that it wasn't before. So again, a really good opportunity to define the value of what COVID is doing to industries and organizations and try and channel that in as well. The final one is around business. So we've got a lot of people on this call who are investing in business and leadership and human skills, which is absolutely essential. We're seeing an uptake in management as kind of the big piece year on year. Actually, what we're seeing a lot from COVID is there is this uptick in communication at the moment, a little uptick in marketing, but broadly speaking, it's all around leadership, because now more than ever, leadership is important from top to bottom of an organization. And if you haven't seen this example, I loved this example. This was 7 Formula One teams who have come together to collaborate to build ventilators to support the health system. And it was such a good example. I remember first seeing this in the news of a truly agile leadership question that says, do we as an organization, as an F1 team, go into collaboration with essentially our competitors, our rivals? And the positive side says, well, this is great because we'll get brand awareness. This is great for a reputation. It's good for the purpose of the organization. But ultimately, in an industry where it's very competitive, you're opening yourself up to sharing your manufacturing processes, to sharing your IP. So this question of whether they were going to do it happened within a matter of days and weeks that they decided. They then had to learn how to get all of these leaders together to collaborate. And what they found, and I read a great article about it, that was talking about how actually the leadership had to collaborate at one level, but also leadership at a different level of the organization as well. So this is kind of a positive example because there are obviously a number of organizations who are having similar difficulties within the leadership space, but actually it's probably not as positive as this. It's much more difficult. But it just talks to the type of things that people want to be learning for leadership and management. It's no longer going into, for example, a London Business School course and saying, we just want to learn about leadership. It's all about these human skills. It's about understanding the opportunities of digital. And it's why we're seeing a lot of our content from the best business schools in the world coming to us and saying, we need things on managing the company of the future. We need things on strategic innovation, agile leadership. What does that look like? So it would be really interesting to hear from people about whether their leadership courses and their training is actually fixed on that as well. So when we wrap up that piece, the kind of the key headings here are, if people are in the space to learn about the future, okay, or for the future, and obviously other people, maybe not, you've got to pitch that to your organization, define the value of the future skills to your learners, make your learning as simple as possible, and then drive it from the top. If you're a little bit unsure and you're not sure what kind of skills you need to look for on a broader scale, there are resources out there. This is our essential skills map for digital transformation, which says across business, technology, and data by function, what are the top trending skills that people need to be thinking about? So we will share some slides out afterwards if you want to look at that and talk to us, then please do. That's kind of what we're seeing in terms of what people are looking for in the marketplace. The final piece I want to do before we're going to go into an open question and answer session is to give you a couple of more pieces of data that I think are really illuminating on what the focus for learning and development leaders should be. If you're sitting there at the moment and you're thinking, you know, this is great, hopefully you're thinking this is great. You're thinking, well, I don't know what it looks like in my industry. Is the same happening within my industry? This is what's happening. Okay, so if you see these little colorful worms across the board, every industry is seeing an uptick in learning at the moment. So if you're not doubling down on your learning, there is a real challenge that you're going to fall behind. But the key piece of data that I want to show, and you can kind of see it in the lines that we've got here, is this graph. Okay, the big difference between industries that we see is the scale of learning. Okay, so this is taken from the very end of 2019, and we've seen it happen again and again during the crisis as well. It's the same pattern. The average learning volume per industry, so a normal consumer company will learn the light blue amount of content, and a technology company will learn the dark blue content. So what you can see is if we're saying that the digital transformation world is growing more quickly and we don't really know what this future looks like, if we do believe, and I hope that people on this call do believe, that learning is the key to being able to adapt and be agile in this environment, you need to really pick up the pace of learning to be able to get people to the next stage, to be able to learn these new tools, these new systems, these new ways of working to actually compete in what is essentially going to be a kind of startup market when we get there, once people come out of this crisis. So the key then for L&D, when we pull together the things that we've learned here from the L&D action plan, is it's all about engagement. Okay, and the way we see that Coursera engagement is about your motivation, do you want to learn, and your ability, like can you actually learn? So motivation is, do I want to do this? Like, can I see the value in it, which is what we've been talking about. The ability piece is, can I do this? Am I allowed? And has it been made easy for me? So just pulling some of the key messages we've taken before, around motivation, follow the demand. If you haven't seen this great demand in personal development and you're not really doubling down, then I'd really suggest that you do, because it will drive engagement, because it's what people want. And define the value of learning, okay? If you're asking the question, why should you learn about COVID-19? Because it's about positive framing for people to understand what's happening. Why should you invest in resilience? It's about the skills to respond to a crisis. And why is it important for people to learn about data, cloud, and leadership? It's about survival. It's about what comes next. So it's really something that we need to double down and show that value. And when we look at the ability, we talked about this CEO in his son's bedroom. If you drive learning from the top, we see it in every piece of data we have with every customer. CEO or CLO, or at least the head of learning will say, this is what we need to do. It will drive a spike in your engagement, which will give people the tools to start learning a bit more. And then one piece that we've touched upon, but I do want to make this really clear. Make learning simple. Okay, so a part of my job is to curate and understand the experience that people are going through when they learn. A lot of people come to us and they say, we need 6 months to come up with our competency framework, and only when we have that will we be able to do something. It's not necessary, okay? You don't need a perfect framework to start. A simple curation can have a massive impact. Think of our technology company. They sent out one email, it was relevant content, and demand spiked. So send out simple curations to get people learning and give them something to take action on. There should be a big bright red button that says, take action here, and it will take you to a course or something that you're looking to do. So with all of this, I would say clearly there is a tone, and you will understand the tone of your organization. You will understand what you need to focus on. But for anyone who's in a large organization and needs to think about different people, we're seeing across the board both sorts of sets of resilience, and also this future of work is what's driving a lot of the enterprise learning as well. So I am going to stop there. We do have time for a number of questions. I'm sure Vinod has been asking them as we go along. Alexandra, shall I hand to you for some questions?
Yes, thank you so much. Lots of good information there. This is fun. So I was jotting them down, so I'm going to sort of circle back to the top. And folks, if you guys have questions while Adam starts answering, then feel free to share them. So do you have any recommendations, or does Coursera have an ideal length of time to conduct online training or their online courses?
You mean an ideal time to invest in the learning?
Yeah. I think how long are your courses? Maybe I'll reframe. I think that's what they mean.
Okay, got you. Okay, so our courses are actually, it is transformational learning that we have on our platform. So most of the courses will be on average between about 10 or 15 hours of learning. But each course is broken down into modules, and the modules are then broken down into lessons and videos. So actually what you have is you might be watching kind of an 8-minute video on something somewhere, and then you can watch on your phone like a 10-minute video on something else, or you could read something. So you really get the opportunity to pick the things that you're looking for. But if you want the certificate, if you want to do proper transformative learning, then you will be learning around that kind of time. And it slightly differs. The softer skills will take a little bit less, and the technical skills will take a bit longer. But that's around the time that we talk about.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. So what types of courses are you recommending? So I think that you answered this throughout, because you mentioned like resilience and well-being, just more educational data about COVID. But when you gave an example of curating a little package, is there anything else that you would include in that little package?
Yeah, so the employee resilience package that we send out is a collection of a few different things. So we have a collection which is on COVID, so people can understand it. We have collections on resilience. We have quite a lot of collections on, or courses on collaboration, virtual work, this kind of, the kind of way that people can adapt to remote working. And then we have some just generally very popular courses that actually link to this, this future piece. So things like AI for everyone and digital transformation are the types of courses that we recommend to people, because they give you this idea of what emerging technology is out there, what you need to think about, and how you how you should interact with it. So we see a huge uptake in literacy across the board from our data and tech pieces to give people the insight. And then once you have the insight, you can go down and start learning some of these things that are critical to your organization.
Very cool. Yeah, those are great examples. So this one, what are 2 elements of resilience, how you frame it, and I'm not exactly remembering this, if you were offering a framework.
Skills to develop. Yeah.
Okay, skills to develop.
Is that a question?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that was just filling in the blank. So for whoever asked that question, those are the 2 elements, how you frame it and the skills to develop, which is reminding me, I jumped over this one. So a few folks asked if you could go back to the consumer side graph when you were talking about that data, if you could just give a little summary of that slide again.
Yeah, absolutely. This one here?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So, so this slide tells you what people were learning in February. So the share of enrollments that we saw on our platform in each of these domains. So these domains are kind of the way we categorize our data and our information, our courses. And what we're seeing in March is the share of enrollments out of 100% across these domains is this huge increase in health and an absolutely astronomical increase comparatively in personal development. So I think the message that we really want to give here is that the health side is really important from a COVID perspective, but in personal development, this is honest demand that people who have not been guided by people like me on what they should learn are seeking out. So if you're not guiding people in personal development and giving them the opportunity, then you're really missing out on, one, helping them, and two, getting engagement in your programs.
Cool. So someone asked this question about, let's see, this was later on when you were showing data. I think this was later on. You showed that, like, across all industries, how everyone is has an uptick in learning, investing in learning. And I think this is when this question was, how much of that data is organizationally directed versus personally directed? And then they gave an example. So for folks who are laid off and maybe they don't have access through work, but they are maybe are investing in self-directed learning, how are you collecting this data?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think this data, as we looked at it, was across the platform. So this was both consumer and enterprise data from what we're seeing, and we can get that information of what the enrollments look like. I think just a couple of things about what happens to people who are laid off. So if people have got an enterprise license and they have kind of furloughed staff, so staff are at home doing it, we're seeing a lot of those people who are taking courses at the moment. For people who are actually laid off and no longer have a job, we actually have a different initiative that we're working on, which is Coursera for workforce recovery. And what we're doing there is we're working with governments to actually offer Coursera to free for people who are laid off and unemployed, so that they can develop those skills and learn immediately to try and get back in the workforce when job opportunities come. So I think, the angle that we've been showing here is very much the enterprise focus and what's happening for businesses with employees at the moment. But for other people who have been laid off, there are other channels that Coursera is working pretty tirelessly at the moment to try and support.
Cool. Will you give us a refresher on the action plan? I think that was on slide 55 for defining value, making learning simple, I believe.
We talking about this one?
I think it was actually the slide 55.
This one, yeah.
There we go.
Sure. So I think the key thing that we wanted to take here is if people are in the space to learn for the future, so only if people are aware, then you need to define the value of future skills to your learners. So this is about saying, instead of saying you should learn data analytics and giving them a course and saying go, what we should be saying to them is, if you're able to learn data analytics, you will be able to do this. Or we as a business would like to go in this direction. And for that, we need people to understand how to use statistical programming and Python and R. And if we're able to do that, then it will give us the ability to move on to real-time data tracking and better decision-making. So I think that defining the value of future skills is really about telling learners why it's important to learn and why it's important to learn that specific skill. The number two around make your learning simple is actually a lot of the time we complicate the curation that we do. We complicate everything and say, this is someone who's in a job role, and this job role is, here are the 15 competencies and the 7 capabilities and the 13 different skills they need, and here are all the courses. And someone looks at that and goes, well, what am I going to do with that? That's just too much. Versus someone who says, look, if you're interested in developing skills in cloud, here are the 3 courses that you might look to first, and then once you go there, there's a specialization, so a sequence of courses that you can then follow, and all of a sudden you're on the path. So I think the key thing is not to overcomplicate this, make it simple at the start, get people used to this kind of culture of learning, and then you can work through it. And then the final piece here is there is literally nothing better than a CEO standing in front of his organization or sitting in front of her organization and saying, this is why learning is important for the organization. You should be learning. This is what we're doing. I'm learning as well. Let's go. And actually, just as an example, we work with another pharmaceutical company, and their CEO said during this period, until the 1st of June, they just launched their digital program. The CEO said, I would like us as a company to get to 1 million hours of learning by the 1st of June. That's the challenge. And obviously, a spike of engagement followed, and all of a sudden their program is flying. So these are really, really important points to think about for your own program.
Great, and that answered some follow-up questions for folks who are wondering what the example was for driving response from the top, and you're talking about executive leadership like CEO. I connected to another question, and maybe it helps to stay on that slide or not, I guess.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. What's the best way to measure the effectiveness or efficiency of this plan? Like, how can people measure it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we actually have, so as part of our skills transformation methodology, the success measures are absolutely critical. And if I go back to the example of HSBC, because this is quite a good one. What we have on the Coursera platform is every single course that we have has assessments associated with those courses. So to complete a course, to get your certificate, every single module, you have to have taken quizzes or assessments or assignments to prove that you have mastered the learning that you have. What we can do, or specifically what Vinod can do, is he can then take that data and use it in our skills graph to say, what proficiency level is someone now at that level of the course? So what HSBC have done here is they've said, look, cloud computing is the big driver. This is the one thing that we really want to do. So we can now go into our data as a platform, and we can say for cloud computing, which is kind of in the computer networking space, how many learners are at a beginner proficiency, how many learners are at an intermediate proficiency, and how many learners are at an advanced proficiency. And you can start to track how learners are doing and actually then see the learners. So what you can then do is you can say, I have a project which needs someone with cloud skills. You can go into that database and say, okay, this person is intermediate proficiency. I'm going to use them for this project. So it gives you an enormous amount of data to start measuring. But also you could just use the certificates. You can say, if you have passed through this course, this is a certificate, then that gives me the idea that you have got knowledge, because you can only get a certificate from Coursera if you have passed the assessments. The one thing I'd just add is in this example from Exelon as well, the main thing that we really try and do when we work with our customers is get them to think from a business perspective. So we want them to say, it's no good coming to the end of a year and saying, we've done 1,000 hours of learning, without being able to say, we've done 1,000 hours of learning and this is what it's impacted. So we really try and get people to think about the business impact of this as well. And we work with our customers to do that.
Awesome. Great examples. Someone was asking if you have average engagement statistics. So I don't know if you have this readily available, but thought I'd throw it out there. Is there an average number of participants who engage with your learning courses?
Yeah, so I think if I answer this in different ways, so we do track active learners within every enterprise contract that we have. And engagement will vary based on kind of really the maturity and the engagement of the organization within the program. So someone, for example, like I think the pharma example I gave you of the 1 million learning hours, they are running out of licenses because they have just full engagement of people flying through these courses and engaging, and there's conversations on how to up that versus others who maybe don't send as many invites out, and then maybe it's a slightly different one. So it's a real spectrum of engagement, but anyone who goes through our kind of skills transformation methodology to work through how to engage and follow our plan, you'll tend to see some very high engagement throughout. I don't have a number, but we do have it in our platform for people to look at when they use our platform.
Cool. No, I think that's a helpful example. Well, I don't see any more questions coming in, so I want to pass it back to you in case you have any final thoughts that you want to share with us before we wrap up.
I do have one. We have one more poll for people, if people would be happy to answer it. We've gone through a lot of information and a lot of data here. So what we'd really like is to hear more about what you would like to hear more about. So we have a question on how to support better COVID-19 awareness, how to support people with personal development, how to guide people towards future skills, or how to set up an engagement plan to drive increased learning. So if we can get answers to what you would like to hear more about in the future, this would be really helpful. Okay, I think we have the final poll numbers coming in. Of course, it goes without saying, if there's any questions we haven't answered, please reach out to us, because we do have the answers. We just want to be able to share. Okay, here we go. So final poll. So COVID-19 gets a very low 4%. So I think people feel comfortable in that space. Personal development, 22%. Oh, sorry, I can't actually see that one. Was the second one personal development? It was. Future skills are 38%, so that's the top, and then also engagement. So that's pretty much what we see across customers. Is, customers want to use us, and certainly our kind of consulting skill service to find out what the skills are that are relevant for their organizations. And also everyone who works with our enterprise actually gets a customer success manager to help if they are kind of a strategic partner. So that gives you the opportunity to get an idea of what engagement looks like. So that's really very helpful. So thank you very much everyone on the call for answering the polls and answering some great questions. And if you would like to hear any more, then yeah, please do let us know. And thank you also, Alexandra, for moderating this. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. We are so grateful to have you here with us today. And I want to thank Joy, our host, and thank you to all our participants. Yeah, I was going to circle back to one more question about personal development, but I think it was answered in the chat slide. All right, so I'll pass it back to you, Joyce.